Paradigm shifts. In 1962, American historian and philosopher of science Thomas Kuhn wrote a book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, in which he looked at the way science develops and advances over time. He identified 4 stages in the process. The first was what he calls normal science, during which there is an accepted model, a dominant paradigm, within which science develops incrementally, filling in the gaps here and there. Gradually during this process, a number of anomalies will appear that can't be easily explained in terms of the dominant paradigm. This is the second stage. And when there are a sufficient number of these anomalies, or when they are severe enough, the dominant paradigm begins to break down, leading to what Kuhn calls extraordinary science. People begin to ask new questions, propose unusual solutions, and chip away at the boundaries of the paradigm. Eventually there's a breakthrough, and a new paradigm emerges, which better explains things, including these anomalies. And this is gradually adopted as the new normal. This is the third stage. This is followed by the fourth stage, a period of consolidation, when the new textbooks are written, and we tend to forget that things were ever different. The best known and probably clearest example of this is the so-called Copernican revolution, when there was a dramatic shift away from the Ptolemaic geocentric view of the universe to the Copernican heliocentric view of the universe. Now, although Kuhn is really only talking about scientific revolutions, clearly this was also a philosophical, theological and sociological shift. The impact of this change in the scientific paradigm by which the universe was understood had deep and far-reaching consequences, far beyond science. This Copernican paradigm shift has become the kind of paradigm shifts. Although Kuhn and others have offered many other examples of this, few cases come close to this one. Note that these are not revolutions in the entire scientific enterprise, but usually within particular disciplines. The shift from Aristotelian mechanics to classical Newtonian mechanics is cited as another example. This also had major philosophical and theological implications, leading ultimately away from theism to deism. The other shift that I would highlight is Darwinism, which also not only has scientific implications, but also philosophical and theological implications. It changes the way that human beings understand themselves in relation to the natural world. We can talk about paradigm shifts towards quantum mechanics, towards relativity, but I don't think we've yet worked through all of the implications of these, and these remain largely unknown, or poorly understood at least, outside the scientific community within the general populace. Since Kuhn wrote his book, there have naturally been various critiques and modifications, some by Kuhn himself, but I think this paradigm still largely holds up. Now, as a philosopher of science, Kuhn naturally focused on the scientific side of these revolutions. However, I think they can all be seen, and probably should be seen, as part of larger philosophical shifts, philosophical paradigm shifts, if you like, philosophical revolutions. Sometimes a shift in scientific paradigms has an impact on philosophy and theology, clearly. But sometimes these changes, these shifts in science, are also the result of philosophical shifts, or a part of a broader shift that's happening in society. I don't think, for instance, that Newton's breakthroughs in science and mathematics can easily be separated from the philosophical revolution that was the Enlightenment. I think that paradigm shift and revolution are terms that can be appropriately applied to the Enlightenment. There are shifts towards reason as opposed to faith, shifts towards empiricism and evidence-based research. It's a shift towards an anthropocentric view of reality as opposed to a theocentric view. With Darwinism, even that anthropocentric view of reality, even the rationality of human beings, is challenged by placing human beings firmly within the realm of nature, an animal among animals. The shift from a theocentric to an anthropocentric paradigm is similar to the shift from a geocentric to a heliocentric paradigm, as is then the shift from an anthropocentric to a biocentric paradigm under the influence of Darwin. Perhaps relativity represents a shift to an eccentric paradigm. In modern physics and cosmology, there is no centre. There's no absolute frame of reference. And perhaps this leads to or reflects a growth in moral relativism as we begin to see Western culture, for example, as only one possible expression of culture among many. When I look around at even just Western society today, I wonder if, in fact, many of these various revolutions are quite complete yet. It's simplistic to think that one mode of thought simply replaces another. The other, older mode of thinking usually persists alongside the newer form. It doesn't give up without a fight. As is the case with most political revolutions, there's usually a conservative reaction, a kind of counter-revolution. And I think we see this today in the increasing rejection of science and rationality. There are groups which just reject completely the scientific, philosophical and societal revolutions that I've been discussing here. It may in fact be that today we have people living within two very different and contradictory paradigms. A rational, anthropocentric, if not quite yet biocentric or eccentric paradigm on the one hand, and a theocentric, anti-rational paradigm on the other. Sometimes I think this division runs through individuals as well as through society. I'm going to venture into a little speculation now. I wonder if we're currently going through some other major paradigm shifts. I think these shifts have been coming more and more quickly over the last few hundred years, one following more and more quickly on the tail of another. And perhaps this makes the societal-wide acceptance of these shifts more difficult. Society simply doesn't have the time to catch up before the next potential shift comes along. Clearly, some people are still struggling with the paradigm shift represented by Darwin. Most of us continue to live as if the relativity and quantum physics paradigm shifts never happened. And in the midst of all this, I think we may be facing, or on the verge of, two other major paradigm shifts. The first of these I would call the gender shift. There is a revolution underway in our concept of gender. We're shifting away from a simplistic binary understanding of gender towards something much more complex and much more interesting. Perhaps it's even a shift away from the concept of gender itself. For a long time, society has been centered, to stick with this concept, on the two-gender model. It has shaped the way we think of ourselves. It shaped society. Are we now perhaps seeing a paradigm shift when human beings are no longer defined in terms of gender? I think the kind of reaction we're presently seeing against this indicates that we are indeed dealing with paradigms here. It's kind of late in this video to be doing this, but let's look at the dictionary definition of paradigm. Its root meaning is an outstandingly clear or typical example or archetype. Clearly, male and female, Adam and Eve, is one possible archetype for humanity. But is another one perhaps non-gendered or multi-gendered? I think, for example, of Hermaphroditus, the son of Hermes and Aphrodite. He merged with the naiad nymph Salmacis to become a creature of both sexes. In another myth reported in Plato's Symposium, human beings were originally spherical beings with 4 arms, 4 legs, and a single head with 2 faces. They were also of 3 types, male from the sun, female from the earth, and androgynous, both male and female, from the moon. When these beings challenged the gods, Zeus decided to weaken them by splitting them in half, creating the separate male and female humans. Perhaps then this offers an alternative paradigm to that of the simple binary male and female. The other paradigm shift I suggest may be underway is from anthropocentric to noocentric. Nous is the Greek word for mind. I'm suggesting noocentric as a term indicating centered upon the mind or upon thinking rather than upon humanity. What do I mean? Well, up until now, we've regarded human beings as the rational thinking beings, par excellence, paradigmatically, if you like. But we're now developing AI, artificial intelligence, and we're well on the way to developing AGI, artificial general intelligence. I think to deal with this philosophically and as a society, we're going to have to make the shift from an anthropocentric to a noocentric paradigm. We will need to conceptualize thought, rationality, and consciousness in broader terms than just human terms. We have to think more broadly than simply human thought, rationality, and consciousness. If this revolution actually goes forward, it's probably going to be the most radical revolution we've ever witnessed. Clearly, many people are still terrified by the paradigmatic changes that have taken place during the last 500 years and are yet to come to grips with many of them. How will they ever cope with the changes that are currently underway or are about to happen, if I'm right? I don't have the answer to that, nor do I want to downplay the challenges they present to us as a society. However, I can't see us being able to halt these movements. They have too much momentum, and as far as AI is concerned at least, we're already becoming dependent on it. Well, maybe I'm on my own here, but I'm prepared to surf this wave.